For those of you who may not have the opportunity to see what we're seeing here, which is an amazing view overlooking Cannes, we are high up in the hills, and we have a great, intimate, engaged group here this morning. But to be honest, it took a bit of work to get up here, and that is a good theme for this morning's conversation because all good things usually come with a little bit of work attached to it. But the great opportunity we have this morning is to hear from a new friend of mine, a friend I met more recently as I engaged my time on this important sustainability journey, and that is an opportunity to sit with Tony Katsur, who heads up the IAB Tech Lab, where he's been for the past 2 years or so. Before we get to Tony, I wanted to give everybody kind of a level set on what AdNet Zero is. And the question I've been asked here in Cannes, but also back stateside, more often than any other question is, so what kind of company is AdNet Zero, and how is that different from the other company I heard of? How is it different from Scope 3? The ANA has a sustainability track, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a good news, bad news story. The great news is that there's a lot of activity that has bubbled up like in the past 12 months or so. So that's a good thing. The challenge is there's a lot of noise out there, and it's really hard to kind of figure out what's fact, what's fiction, what's going to stick, what's not going to stick. And because in the United States we live in a fairly polarized world, the fact of the matter is there's this tendency to sort of not want to say anything until everything is perfect. And that's a really big watch out because, sometimes it's better to be roughly right than precisely wrong. And so at AdNet Zero, very simply, we are not a company. We are a new association that is entirely supporter-based, that has one mission in mind, and that is to create a common and consistent measurement framework for carbon emissions. And why is that important? Well, the advertising industry has an incredible line of sight on their Scope 3 emissions. And so this industry, even more so than others, has a true opportunity to make real strides in getting the industry to get its house in order. But let's be clear, we're not just doing it for that reason, we're doing it because we are also in service of the world I came from, clients, advertisers, corporations. And many of these corporations work with a myriad of different companies, all of which are starting to get their arms around carbon, but they're doing it in different ways. And they're approaching measurement in different ways, which is going to be a huge problem because it's not going to come up apples to apples to apples to apples. And it's going to be a mess. And that's going to be a mess for all of us. So we're really doing this in service of the clients. We're making great progress at AdNet Zero. We're getting a tremendous amount of support. Sustainability is the theme in Cannes this year for good reason because there's so much opportunity to make strides, and we are making strides in production and in media. A lot of the progress in the media arena, in the U.S. anyway, comes in concert with a lot of our great friends. And I call them friends because we're on a similar mission, but they're really sleeves up in this journey. Friends in this room here today, and a friend of mine, Tony Katsur. We partnered with the IAB Tech Lab, along with Scope 3 and a lot of you here, to create a lot of great work that ultimately went into a starter guide that Tony's going to talk about in just a second. But without further ado, let's just get on with the show. Let's bring Tony up here. He's a good friend. Tony Katsur, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for joining us. So, lots of good questions for you today. And I mentioned, what has it been, about 2 years since you've been with the IAB Tech Lab?
August 21.
But who's counting? Exactly, right down to the hour.
August 2nd, 21.
So look, we live in a world where 2 years, so much happens in 2 years. In the old world, it would have probably taken 200 years for it to happen. But give us a view from your perch on what you've seen rapidly develop and accelerate over your 2-year tenure with the IAB Tech Lab.
Myriad issues. Privacy remains an existential crisis and opportunity for our ecosystem. So Tech Lab, we've been focused on that for several years before I joined. I suspect we will be focused on that for years beyond now. The next 5 to 7 years, I think privacy, identity, and addressability will remain a core focus of the Tech Lab. We recently introduced our Advanced TV initiative to the ecosystem, which is making all television environments addressable, including broadcast, satellite, cable, so all things linear, as well as CTV. So that's another way Tech Lab has evolved. We haven't really taken the leap into the television ecosystem until recently. So that was a big announcement we made last November when we launched the Advanced TV Commit Group. Foundational standards, so updates to the RTB protocol, VAST, our anti-fraud frameworks. That's always ongoing foundational work that we continue to remain focused on. And then new definitions around video, minorly controversial, depending on who you are. But new definitions around in-stream and outstream video, new audio and podcast measurement guidelines. We're also now working much more closely with WFA on the cross-media measurement initiative. So it's nice to have partnership with other trades to solve for measurement across different environments. And then most recently, what we announced, what really started last year at Tech Lab Summit, in 2022's Tech Lab Summit, we announced earlier this year the creation of the Sustainability Initiative and Working Group at the Tech Lab. And in roughly 4 short months, we went from 0 members to just shy of about 90 members. We went from full stop to a sustainability playbook that we announced at June 7th at the IAB Tech Lab Summit. So in 4 months' time, the engagement across the industry, brands, ad tech, publishers, AdNet Zero, GARM, and others has really been phenomenal to see everyone come together so quickly on this. And I think that just demonstrates the urgency of what's happening to our planet and what contribution we as an industry can make to create a more sustainable environment for future generations.
That is incredible work, and I know firsthand some of the real tangible things that you're doing. It's interesting because I don't come from the tech space. I grew up in the account world where you were taught to kind of address the aching needs on behalf of clients. I'm more of a generalist. You know a lot about a lot when it comes to tech. One of the things I've really seen is that the tech world has really collided into the mainstream world in terms of the more generalists out there. But for the sake of the audience, depending upon who's viewing, can you kind of break it down for us? For example, I've heard a lot of talk about lazy load. I recently, I didn't know what lazy load was a couple of years ago. Now I know. I've heard a lot about the hops and about waste. What are some of the big rocks and obstacles that you and your working group have been engaged in trying to either fix or mitigate or remove? Give us some examples if you don't mind.
Sure, and to be clear, the working group, it's not just Tech Lab, it's all of our member companies. AdNet Zero's in the working group. You've contributed to it. GARM's in the working group. Duration Media is in the working group. Some of the members of the audience are in the working group. So we, in the sustainability playbook that we released earlier this month, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, ad operational and technical things that companies can do today. And most of them are not incredibly heavy lifts. The level of efforts are relatively low. So concepts like lazy load. Don't load an ad onto the page if it's not in view. Don't make the ad call if it's not in view. And there are millions of ad impressions are still loaded and processed, even if it's below the fold. And every time an ad impression is processed, it burns carbon. It uses energy. It uses bandwidth. It uses CPU cycle. It uses disk. It uses I/O. All of these things use energy and therefore burn carbon. Lazy load is a simple concept of do not call the ad impression until the ad slot comes into view. And that is literally a checkbox in your ad server. It's that simple. You just have to tick the box. And it was surprising as we looked across the industry and we saw how many companies actually weren't enabling that capability. It's a checkbox. So that was one area that we promoted in the sustainability playbook. Another is counting hops, or how many times an impression is processed. And we've been able to count hops in this ecosystem for going on 3 years now. When the Tech Lab introduced what's called the supply chain object, that is a notation on the impression that counts every hop an impression goes through in the supply chain. Every time an impression is touched, that burns carbon. A computer has to process that impression opportunity. Now, there can be reasons for multiple hops within reason, but we have seen in the industry where impressions go through, without exaggeration, up to 15, 20, 25 hops. A, that's probably fraud, probably. And B, that again, what makes it doubly worse is that not only is it being touched 15, 20 times, therefore burning carbon, it's also highly likely to be fraud, which means there's not even a human behind it. So there's zero ROI for the advertiser. Publishers are being ripped off, and it's burning carbon needlessly. So we introduced what's called the supply chain object about 3 years ago. That's been marginally adopted, but a quick fix is if the industry, if advertisers pound the table, and John, I know your history working with brands over your career, if advertisers would demand the use of the supply chain object and reporting against that, that would immediately cut down the number of times an impression is processed through our industry. So those are just some of the low-hanging fruit items that we published in the Sustainability Playbook earlier this year.
That is phenomenal. Now, you also referenced earlier that you've got a lot of collaboration going on. No one group can kind of go it alone. This is really going to require us collectively locking arms and climbing the hill, if you know what I mean. And one of the greatest partnerships that we're lucky to have is with the WFA and with GARM. So there's a lot going on. Sometimes people come up to me, they're like, yeah, but what are you really doing? Some of it is, quite frankly, going through the rigor of connecting the dots and making sure that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing and vice versa. Sounds simple. Usually when there's a massive breakdown, it's because of a lack of communication or just wrong communication. So consistent, clear, transparent, wide open communication is obviously really key. But how is the collaboration going? And when there are conflicts that arise, inevitably they do, it's not always puppies and candy canes. Inevitably there is going to be conflict. How do you kind of resolve that? How do you build consensus in the collaboration process?
A phone call. Pick up the phone.
I thought it was Thunderdome.
Pick up the phone. Go have a beer with you. You know, connect with Rob Rakowitz over at GARM.
Exactly. It's so funny, but I would agree.
I mean, it's not that hard, right? And this entire initiative around sustainability. I'm an avid outdoorsman. I camp. I fish. I hunt. I hike. I enjoy this environment around the world. I truly do, and it means a lot to me personally. But you know, we've established swim lanes in terms of what's Net Zero focused on, what's Tech Lab focused on, what's GARM focused on. I think it started with that. Like, what are the swim lanes in terms of what we're working on? But then simultaneously, we're getting pushed. So we introduced the Sustainability Playbook earlier this month, and now Tech Lab Working Group, we're pushing us internally. It's good for them to push to say, hey, we need to now start defining key metrics. And we said, hold on a second. We know Net Zero and GARM are working on establishing key metrics. So what did we do? We dropped you and Rob a note, and we were like, hey, we're getting a lot of pressure internally from our working group. Good thing, good problem to have. But we know you guys are also working on metrics. Can we help? You know, can you use our support for that? Do you want us to propose something? And you and Rob were like, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. It's that simple. Like, communication is key to this.
And Rob and his team have been phenomenal.
Rob's been great.
Some of
Rob
them
and
are
GARM
here.
have been fantastic.
Yeah.
And you and Rob are like, yeah, we'll definitely take the help. So we're going to start working on that in conjunction with you. Again, you guys are in the working group. You're in those meetings. GARM is in those meetings. So that's going to be our next step, is establishing baseline metrics in partnership with GARM and Net Zero. So it's that simple. Pick up the phone.
Yeah. So anything you want to add in terms of the Green Supply Path Initiative and the starter guide and the working group or anything else? Or should we?
Yeah, I would look. Anyone watching, everyone here, it's published on the IB Tech Lab website. Very easy to find. Read it, put it to use, deploy it. Advertisers, brands demand the use of some of the key best practices in there. Yeah, I would do that. You can do it today. Some of this stuff is not hard.
Can I keep you a little longer? I'm gonna suggest going into the overtime session. We're writing the rules as we go here.
This is like Bill Maher overtime.
Yeah, why not? You know, so here's the scoop. So we've covered this. What is next in as you look out at the road ahead? What's the next big thing that you see?
We had two paths, two work streams as part of our initial charter for year one. One was getting out a sustainability playbook, which we'll likely iterate on. Now that it's in the wild, it's been published, we've already gotten some initial feedback from the industry. So we'll probably have a minor revision, an update to that. I think that's going to remain a living document for the industry. So I think we'll have a revision to that second half of the year. But then our other stated goal this year was for the Tech Lab to publish and host for the industry supply path telemetry around number of hops, how many times an impression is actually touched and processed. And that doesn't mean, by the way, I want to be clear, there are reasons for publishers to use multiple supply chains, multiple supply paths. I think different types of media, whether it's digital video versus CTV versus display versus mobile web, require different supply paths because there are different constituents that are experts in operating those supply paths. So it's not necessarily a bad thing for an impression to be processed several times. 20 times seems a bit extreme, right? So our next half of our charter is to start to host and publish data for the industry to use to optimize supply paths based on sustainability goals. That's what we're focused on for the second half. And then more recently, working with you and GARM on establishing some key metrics. We are not at Tech Lab, I want to be clear, because I've been asked this week. I've been asked by others over the course of the past several months. We are not building a calculator. I'm looking to GARM and on Net Zero to create those product requirements. Could we then develop it once you've given us the requirements as you work with the industry? We can. We have engineering to do that. And can we host it for the ecosystem? Absolutely. But Tech Lab's not building the sustainability or carbon calculator. We'll work with GARM and at Net Zero in the industry and get those requirements. And then we do have the engineering talent to build it, and we have the infrastructure to host it. So that's likely something we'll do once you guys are ready to give us those requirements.
Awesome. AI, another big theme here in Cannes. I'm going to say 2 words to you. You tell me if it hurts, helps, because I'm unclear. AI, sustainability. The two of them together, a good thing, or opportunity, or furthering the problem? What is it?
That's a really deep question. I think AI,
We're off script. We can always cut
we were
this.
way off script. Yeah, is this going to be edited out? So no, AI, I think, look, there's 2 sides to every coin. I think AI certainly can help in terms of, I think AI shows a lot of promise in the area of in privacy, consumer privacy, as well as identity. I think with smarter cohort-driven AI models, I think the need for things like constant cookie matching, which burns a huge amount of carbon. That's one of the big culprits in generating a carbon footprint for this industry. I think AI-powered audience creation definitely holds promise to decrease the amount of matching. I mean, look, with the third-party cookie ostensibly going away anyway, that's going to happen. But things like data clean rooms, first-party data collaboration, I think AI holds a tremendous amount of promise where you match once, and that is potentially a carbon-intensive exercise the first time. But unlike cookie matching, where you're constantly, every day, every millisecond, you're looking to match cookies. Once you do that match, once that linkage is created, you maybe have to refresh that weekly, monthly. So the initial carbon cost is tremendous, but you don't have to do it nearly as frequently. So I think that shows tremendous promise. I think some of the challenges of AI is a data beast, right? I mean, AI eats data for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and there's a lot of processing that goes into that. So I think as we as an industry, but I think also which transcends our industry, we need to factor in sustainability metrics around AI in terms of the data it's processing. How much data is it processing? There's a lot of things around data governance and AI regarding how much data should you retain? How much data should you process? If there's data available, do you actually need it to inform your machine learning models? And I think there's a green aspect to that because maybe you don't need to process certain data sets to inform your machine learning. So I think there's 2 sides to that coin, and I think it requires prudence to determine whether or not you actually need to process the data or not.
Completely agree. Thank you, Tony. I hope to, in a year from now, let's say we're sitting down. And we'll end on this. What's your hope, aspiration, dream?
I hope next year here, I hope we're actually talking about initial green or carbon footprint metrics in the industry. I hope we've actually established some baseline. It doesn't mean we're done. Again, I think like privacy and other initiatives, this is a multi-year, multi-decade initiative for the ecosystem. But I would be delighted to be sitting here talking to you about some of the key metrics we've established as an industry that we're starting to measure against. You can't manage what you can't measure. We have to start with measurement. And we have to standardize that measurement. I mean, we've been dealing with cross-measurement, cross-media measurement issues for decades since the industry's been created. And we all know, folks watching and people in the room, what a challenge that's been. I don't think we can play around with that when it comes to sustainability issues for the planet. So I'd like to have some standard that the industry has come together, coalesced around, and agreed to that we can discuss next year.
Amen to that. Amen to that. I can't thank you enough, Tony, for your partnership, for all the incredible work, the heavy lifting that's going on, and the real progress that's being made in a very, very, very important way, in a very, very, very busy, noisy, but in a sector where there is a tremendous amount of opportunity. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to seeing you next.
Thank you.